We'll just wait for 1 or 2 more minutes and then we will start. Okay, so I guess 12 people have already joined, so we will start. And yeah, so hello guys, my name is Soham Lakhote. I welcome all of you for this NPTEL Week 1 live session on the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar from IIT Hyderabad. So I'm currently studying in the ISC Bangalore. I'm currently a third year PhD student, and my research area is mostly basically vital signs monitoring, that is basically determining the heart rates and breathing rate without attaching any sensors to your body and directly wirelessly using the radars. So basically our broad area of the focus is mostly on the analog and RF circuits, which are basically used in the radars on chip. So you know the semiconductor chips, right? So we design the radars on these semiconductor chips and then we use them for different applications. So just before going forward, I just want any one of you to confirm whether my writing is visible or not. I'm just drawing some random thing. Just tell me whether the red color is visible or not.
Yes.
Yeah, it's visible. Good. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, sir. Yeah. So just a minute. Wait, someone again wants to. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah, so basically the contents are going to be like this for this session. So basically I will connect the bigger picture for you, like basically where this course stands and what are you going to benefit out of this course. And the next thing is like why we want to study the semiconductor. Let's say in future somebody wants to be a circuit designer in the analog domain, in the digital domain, or somebody wants to go into the verification of the circuits, then why even having this subject in your course curriculum is very important. And after that we will solve few problems, and then I have prepared some review questions for you to check your understanding. So this will be mostly a part of your homework, like you have to brainstorm yourself, and if you have any doubts, then in the next session you can come and ask me like I'm not able to understand this review question, so can you please elaborate. So this is how the flow is going to be. Now just a minute, where is my lesson? Yeah, so basically this is the bigger picture. So currently we are here, basically we are currently doing the semiconductor device analysis and its modeling. We are at the very beginning of this course. So there is someone in the industry called as a PDK engineer. So his job is like the semiconductor device and modeling guys are there, so they will prepare a model for the transistor, basically which is going to be used in your chips, basically a processor, maybe any circuit basically. So what this job of this PDK engineer is like this, after preparing these models by the semiconductor devices, so what is going to happen is like this PDK engineer will be a communication channel between this semiconductor device guys and the semiconductor foundry. So the semiconductor foundry is a place where you fabricate these chips. Okay, so what is going to happen is like based on the models that have been prepared by the semiconductor device guys, so these models are going to be passed on to the semiconductor foundry. They are going to fabricate that transistor, and the theoretical and the basically what you can say the experimental results are going to be matched, and if they are not matching, then they will be aligned somehow by introducing by changing the model of the transistor or something. So after preparing this model, what this PDK engineer does is like it introduces that model in something we call as a CAD tool. So basically CAD tool is a place where you will see the transistor as a black box. Basically you just use the transistor to design your circuits and nothing else. So what is going to happen, but behind this transistor, whatever models are there, this semiconductor device guys, PDK engineer and semiconductor foundry, basically three of these will communicate with each other and they will prepare a model which is going to be used by the circuit designers to design different kind of circuits like microprocessors. Like let's say you want to receive a wireless signal, so there is a RF circuitry at the in your mobile, in your laptop. So basically these designers use these CAD tools to design the circuits, and inside the CAD tools you have the models basically which have been prepared by these top 3 guys that you are able to see basically. So now coming to the foundry basically. So the foundry, what it does is like it just fabricates the bare silicon die and the circuits on top of it. It doesn't do the basically the IC that you see, it is something like this, right? It is looking like a black, and then you have some legs coming out of it. But if you just open this black covering, then you will be able to see there is a bare silicon die that is sitting over there. So this die is being fabricated by the semiconductor foundry. Okay, now this after fabrication of these dies, what there is something called as the packaging. So basically we protect these ICs from the external environment, and then we introduce a package. So basically whatever connections have been present inside this bare die, basically they have been taken out and they have been put like the legs of these ICs. So this job of doing this is for the packaging guy basically, and then these ICs are used in the end user application. Let's say this is a microprocessor IC, so you put this on your motherboard and then you use it basically for whatever purpose you want. So this black IC, if you open it, then it will look something like this. The red thing that you are seeing over here, it's your silicon die, and this is the encapsulation that you have, and these are the legs of the ICs. So basically currently you are here, and just note the fact that if anything fails over here, let's say you introduce the wrong model, or let's say there is some leakage current or some phenomena that you have not modeled at all because you think that phenomena is negligible, and if it doesn't go go into the PDK engineers, basically even he doesn't know like that phenomena is significant, and you insert that type of a faulty model inside the CAD tool, then whatever circuits that circuit designer will be designing, of course he doesn't know what models are there. Of course he roughly know what is there inside, but he doesn't know, he is not there to calculate the 100 parameters that the device guy is supposed to do, right? So if there is any mistake over there, then what is going to happen is like this IC will not function like whatever you have thought. And note the fact that this single IC is not fabricated. The foundry is supposed to fabricate lakhs and thousands of this type of ICs, this type of bare dies basically. So if anything happens, then the lakhs of components are going to get what you can say, they will not be functioning properly, and company will incur crores rupees of loss. So that's why you can see the error from this semiconductor device guys is gonna propagate, and ultimately it is going to result into a faulty functioning of my IC. So that's why this studying over here, emphasizing on this course is very very important, because any failure over there is going to get propagate and it is going to get amplified till it reaches the end user application basically. I hope this picture is clear to you. So I'm moving to the next line. Just keep this flow in your mind basically. So as I told you, so this is what the zoom version will look like. So if you look at these wires basically, then whatever is present inside this rectangle, it is all fabricated using the silicon. These are what we call as the wire bonds, which we use to take the connections out of this silicon, and basically these connections are then being put in the legs of this IC basically, and then you use these ICs to put it on a PCB board or a motherboard so that you can go ahead with your functionality, right? So now why this course basically, why this course is, as I just gave you one example, like I gave you the overall flow, idea of the overall flow, how it looks like basically. Now coming to the details, basically you have the Schrodinger's equation at the start, right? Now from that Schrodinger equation, basically it includes the wave function, right? Now from the wave function, you know, like a simplest case is electron which is there in a potential well basically, right? Now what happens from this simple case, we move to the atoms where we tell you basically, okay, that electron, now what is happened, it is not a 1D potential well, it is a 3D potential well, because the electron is bound by the potential from the nucleus, right? So what has happened after that is like now from one atom, we told you, okay, there is not one atom, there is a lattice and there are multiple atoms nearby that particular atom. So what happened because of this, we didn't get one potential well, but we got the series of potential wells, right? And now from the Kronecker model, you know, we got the EK diagram, and from the band theory of solids, what happened is like when two atoms are moved very close to each other, then what happens, their wave functions start to interact with each other, and the energy levels basically split because of the Pauli's exclusion principle. And after the energy levels are split, what you get is like you got the valence band, conduction band, you got the band gap, energy gap between the valence band and the conduction band, right? So that band gap and the effective mass, basically you are going to get introduced to this term basically. So you will get this from the EK diagram basically. So now from these terms, the band gap as well as the effective mass, these some of these terms are going to go into the carrier concentration, that is the number of holes and the number of electrons that are present in the semiconductor, which is ultimately going to be used for calculating the current that is flowing, right? So the whole purpose of the semiconductor is like the tunability. I want to tune the current, I want to tune the conductivity of the semiconductor depending on type of the doping that I introduce in the particular semiconductor, right? So this device current computation, this leakage current, so basically the leakage current is nothing but what you can say the unintended current that you don't want but it exists in the device because of some phenomena that you will be studying later in the course, right? So now what happens because of this? So this device current computation, when you get this, then this is the very important formula for calculating the gain of the circuit and other parameters which we circuit designers, the analog and RF circuit designers, are going to use to design the different RF circuits or analog circuits which are going to get used in your mobiles in form of a module, right? And coming to the leakage currents, basically, let's say you, as I told you, let's say that semiconductor device guy forgot to include one very important leakage current phenomena. He thought it is negligible, but it is not at all negligible. So what is going to happen? You fabricated your processor like this, and now what is going to happen when it is going to get inserted into the mobile? So let's say it was supposed to, the mobile's battery was supposed to last for 5 or 6 hours, but just because this leakage current is much more as compared to what we had thought, your mobile's battery is going to get drained down, right? So now just because of the some miscalculation or some thinking like this leakage current phenomenon is not important, what had happened is like your functionality has reduced a lot, whatever you have thought, your specs have reduced, right? So now you again go back to these all these terms, basically you try to figure out from where this is coming, and to basically, as you will be seeing, some quantum phenomena may be responsible for some kind of unintended effects in the devices, unintended effects in the transistors, basically that can be only explained in using the quantum mechanics. So that's why and the base of the quantum mechanics, as we have told you, is basically your wave function that is coming from the Schrodinger's equation. So that's why the understanding this part is actually important, because if you don't characterize your device properly, if you don't characterize the transistor properly, you don't calculate whatever other unintended effects are, then you won't be able to actually tell what my specs of the processor will be, basically. And any problem over there can be only explained like you have to literally go back and you have to understand from the theory like why this has happened, then you have to derive the equations, you have to get some parameters, those parameters are then going to be used in some of the currents or some other way. These effects have to be included somewhere, right? So that's why just don't think like the quantum mechanics is not at all useful. Behind the scenes multiple things are going on actually, and if you are able to understand this, then all the other domains, basically let's say PDK engineer, some analog circuit design engineer, RF design engineer, verification engineer, all these domains you will be actually able to understand in depth like what is actually happening. So please any one of you can unmute and just tell me whether this flow is clear or not, because this is very important, because whatever questions we are going to solve, like you should not feel like this is completely useless. So whenever you get this type of feeling, just remember this flow diagram, like how we have moved from Schrodinger's equation to the processors and circuits. So can any one of you please unmute and tell me whether this flow is clear or not? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's clear. Good.
Yeah.
Just let me check whether there are some people in the lobby who are waiting. Okay. Just yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now we will start solving our questions. So now, as you know, this is a very easy question. So this is directly taken from the lecture notes. So as you can see from the EK diagram in the lecture notes, so you will be able to see that the bottom of the conduction band and what you can say the top of the valence band, if they are overlapping with each other, then you can say that the semiconductor is a direct band gap semiconductor, right? But in case of silicon and germanium, we have seen that the top of the valence band and the basically the bottom of the conduction band, they don't overlap with each other. So that's why we know the silicon and germaniums are basically indirect band gap semiconductors. Okay. Uh, yeah. So I want this is a very easy question. So I want answer from you guys. Basically, you guys tell me what is the correct option. So which of the following is correct in terms of conductivity? Like. Hello, if someone was saying something, I was not able to hear. Can you repeat it loudly?
The second option.
The second option, yeah, it's correct. Yeah, good, good. Now, coming to this another MCQ, so the band gap of the elements in the ascending order. So, out of the diamond, germanium, and silicon, can any one of you tell me which is the insulator?
Fourth option.
The fourth
Sorry,
option.
the last option.
Correct. The diamond is
last
in
option.
the, yeah, it's a diamond is a insulator basically, right? And other two are basically semiconductors, and the germanium band gap is somewhere around 0.7. Oh, something has happened. Wait.
0.67.
Yeah, 0.67 AV, correct. And for SI it is 1.
1.12.
Correct, correct. Yeah, good, good. Thanks. Now, as someone had said, the last option is the true one, basically. So, and yeah, so now the band gap of a material is 9 electron volts at a room temperature. Again, somebody wants to join the meeting. Hey, can anyone of you tell like how to admit all the people in the meeting? Actually, I have to continuously click on admit all, basically. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So basically the band gap of a material is 9 electron volts at a room temperature. So what can material be basically? So as we have seen in the previous case, like the band gaps of the semiconductor, what were they in the order? 1.1 eV, 0.7 eV basically, right? So basically for semiconductors, if your band gap is less than 4 electron volts, then you consider this material as basically a semiconductor. And so obviously if the band gap has to be less than 4 electron volts, now here the band gap of the material is around 9 electron volts. So what do you guys think, this material is a what, metal or insulator? Can you repeat?
Insulator.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So the option A is the correct option, right? So now coming to the next point. Yeah. So this is a very simple numerical. So what is asked over here is like we have to determine the cutoff wavelength of a light that can be used for intrinsic excitation of a semiconductor material of band gap 1.1 eV. So the case is you have the EG. So this is the what I can say, the valence band, and this is the conduction band, and EG is given to be 1.1 electron volt. Okay, so I want all of you to please take a calci with you because we will be solving few numericals and we will be requiring a calci for that purpose. So just a minute, what is happening? Yeah. So now the EG is 1.1 eV, right? So what is happening is like the cutoff wavelength of light. So we are basically shining the light on the semiconductor material, and it is asked for you like after shining that light, so the photon's energy basically has to go to the electron, then that electron will go from the valence band to conduction band, right? So we have been asked to calculate the wavelength of the light basically, and the band gap of the semiconductor is 1.1 eV. So what do you know? So what do you know, the energy of the photon, right? It can be calculated as hc by lambda, correct? Now this energy at least has to be greater than or equal to the band gap of the semiconductor, so that when I shine this photon on the semiconductor material, the electron will excite from the valence band to conduction band, right? So this is clear, right? So now by using this, so what we got, basically the lambda has to be less than or equal to hc by Eg, correct? Now what we can do is like so basically if I take the minimum wavelength, then this will become the cutoff wavelength, right? And I will just put equal to sign over there. So this will be equal to hc by Eg, right? So what this hc is basically nothing but 1.24 electron volts, right? And what is the Eg? Eg is nothing but 1.1 electron volts, right? So now when you divide this two, you will get the answer to be, so basically when I put hc as 1.24 eV, then this lambda is in micrometers, right? This has been taken again from the lecture note, so if you are feeling any confusion, then you can just quickly revert back to your lecture material. And so when you divide this to ratio, it will become as 1.125, correct? So what is the correct option? So the correct option is B, basically. Again, somebody wants to join the meeting here. Wait. Yeah. Yeah, so I hope this numerical is clear, and please feel free to interrupt me because I'm using my laptop to write on the screen, so I won't be able to read the chat. So if you have any doubts and if you have any confusion or if I'm doing something wrong, then please feel free to interrupt me, okay? So yeah, so now this example has been taken from it has been taken from the Donald Niemann. So what has been asked is like electron has a kinetic energy of 12 milli electron volts. So determine its de Broglie wavelength, right? So as you know, the kinetic energy, so basically we have to determine what? We have to determine the de Broglie wavelength, which is given by h by p, right? Now, but p is not given to me, right? What has been given is the kinetic energy. So I have to get the momentum basically from the kinetic energy. So as you know, the what you can say, we can relate the kinetic energy and the momentum by this formula, right? Correct. So now if I just put basically, so if I convert this, then the P will be equal to under root of 2m into E, where E is your kinetic energy, right? So the de Broglie wavelength will now become equal to lambda is equal to h upon under root 2m E, correct? So now if we just put the values, so lambda is so h is what, just a minute here. So h is what, 6.634 into 10 to the power minus 34. Then you divide, then the mass of the electron is what, 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kgs. And what is the E that is been given? So it's in electron volts, right? So 1 electron volt is nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules, right? So if I just basically, sorry, yeah, correct. So the 12 into 10 to the power minus 3, this has been given in the electron volts. So I have to multiply this by the value of the charge, right? So 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, right? So yeah, so this is correct. So now if you just calculate this value, then you will be able to get like the lambda will be coming very close to 1.1096 into 10 to the power minus 8 meters, right? But the thing is like it has been asked in the units of Armstrong, right? So if I convert it into the Armstrong, then you just need to multiply by this 100, because 1 Armstrong is I will just write it, 1 Armstrong is nothing but 10 to the power minus 10 meters, right? So I have to multiply this by the value of 100, so it will become equal to 110.96 Armstrongs, right? So this is the de Broglie wavelength. I hope this is clear. This was not a difficult problem. And what is the next part? So this is the part B. So a particle with the mass has a de Broglie wavelength of 112 Armstrongs. Determine the momentum and the kinetic energy. Okay, so what has been given is like, as you know, basically the lambda has been given. So as you know from the de Broglie's formula, the momentum is given by h upon lambda. We again have been given this 6. Let's put all the values. What is lambda? Basically the lambda is nothing but 112 into 10 to the power minus 10, right? So if you just calculate this value, then it will come out to be 5.92 into 10 to the power minus 26 kg meter per second, right? So now you got this value of the momentum, right? Now again from the formula, this formula, basically the kinetic energy, you can again calculate energy is nothing but p square by 2m. So again if you put this value of p that you are seeing over here and the mass of the electron, if you put, then you will be able to get it like so you will be able to do something like this. It will come out to 7.9737 into 10 to the power minus 21 joules basically. But again it has been so basically the kinetic energy, if we convert this joules from joules to electron volts, then we have to divide it by what you can say a charge 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. So then this will become in EV, and after that if you calculate this value you will be able to get 49.8 milli electron volts. Okay, so if you have any doubts then you can feel free to interrupt, like I will move ahead as this was not a tough numerical. Then just a minute. Yeah, so now coming to this question, again it has been taken from the Donald Newman. So it has been given like if the uncertainty in the position of an electron is 8 Armstrong, so determine the minimum uncertainty in the momentum. So from Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you know, like uncertainty in momentum into uncertainty into the what you can say the position of electron, it should be greater than or equal to h hash by 2, which is equal to h upon 4 pi, right? So now so basically we have been asked to calculate the delta p, right? So the delta p, what I can do is like I can take delta x on the right hand side, I can take h upon 4 pi into delta x, right? So now we just have to put the values, right? So delta p minimum will be nothing but the lowest value of the right hand, will be the lowest value. So I will just put equal to sign, right? So what is the value of h? 6.634 into 10 to the power minus 34, right? Divided by 4 into 3.14 into the position in the uncertainty in the position basically. So it has been given but 8 Armstrong. So for converting Armstrong into the meters, I have to multiply it by 10 to the power minus 10, right? So if you calculate this value, then the delta P minimum will come out to be 6.5875 into 10 to the power minus 26 kg meter per second. Okay, now the next question is pretty interesting. So it has been asked like if the nominal value of the momentum is 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 23 kg meter per second, determine the corresponding uncertainty in the kinetic energy. Okay, so first of all we have to relate the energy and the momentum by equation. So you know the energy is nothing but the p square by 2m, right? So if I just take a derivative basically on both the sides basically, then dE will be equal to, I am not basically writing with respect to a particular thing, I will tell you why. So if I just take the dE, then 1 upon 2m is constant, right? Then I have to take the d of p square, then this will become dE is equal to 1 by 2m. What is the d of p square? It will become 2p dp, correct? So now what we got, dE is equal to p by m into dp, correct? Now if I just replace dE with delta E, basically a small change in E. So this what it has been done is like is a small change in the E will relate to how much change in the momentum. So this is what this equation is telling you basically. So and if I replace dP with delta P, then what you will be able to get is like delta E is equal to P by M into delta P. So what is this telling you? A minimum uncertainty in the momentum given the nominal value of the momentum will tell you what is the uncertainty in the kinetic energy of an electron, right? So this is what this equation is telling you, right? So now we will just put the values. So what is the delta E? A nominal value of the momentum is given as 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 23. The mass of an electron, as you know, 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kgs, and delta P we have just calculated, right, in the part A. So this is nothing but the delta P, right? So if I put this value 6.5875 into 10 to the power minus 26, and if you calculate this value basically, then you will be able to get delta E is equal to 8.687 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules. And if you convert it into the electron volts. So for converting it, then you have to divide by 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. Then this will become in electron volts. So the delta E value will come out to be 5.429 electron volt. Okay, I hope this question was clear. If you have any doubts, then please feel free to interrupt. I guess somebody again wants to join the meeting. Okay. Just let me. Yeah. Okay. Recording is being recorded. Yeah. Okay. I hope this question was clear. Now, if I. Yeah. So now this is a very good question, and again it has been taken from the unsolved problems from the Donald Niven. So what has been given is like it is desired to produce X-ray radiation with wavelength of 1 angstrom. Through what potential difference must the electron be accelerated in the vacuum so that it can, upon colliding with the target, generate such a photon? So normally what happens, we shine the light, we basically the photons energy, basically the photons hit hit the semiconductor material, its energy is transferred to the electrons in the valence band, then they get such an energy that they jump into the conduction band, right? Here we are doing something different. We are actually taking a material like a tungsten. Basically we are putting a beam of electrons, hitting it with the beam of the electrons, and we are going to get X-rays because of we are going to get X-ray radiations basically because of this. So the first question that has been asked is like basically we want to know, like if you just see the diagram on the right hand side, you have a cathode, you have a anode as well, right? So you are applying a potential difference, right? This potential difference is going to give a energy to the electrons. Now these the electrons with this energy are going to hit the tungsten target, and from after hitting the tungsten target, we are going to get these X-ray radiations whose wavelength is given as 1 angstrom, right? So what you have to calculate is like we have to calculate what should be the value of this potential difference that is present over here, right? So now I will just basically it has also been given, assume all of that electrons energy is transferred to the photon. Basically what they are telling us is like you have to apply the conservation of energy principle, right? So the energy of the photon, right, that is going to be basically the energy of the X-ray radiation that you are going to get, it should be wait a minute, where is the eraser? Oops, what has just happened? Okay, yeah, so I will just cut it. So the energy of the so the energy of the radiation that you are going to get, it should be equal to the energy of the electron, right? Now if I have a electron basically, and electron is there and I am applying some potential difference, then as you know the energy can be given as Q, the charge of the electron into the potential difference, right? And these are the radiations, right? These are again the photons that are going to get generated from the tungsten target when the electrons are hitting. So again the energy can be given as hc by lambda, right? So this has been asked, and why we are doing this, because it has been told us like you have to apply the conservation of energy principle, right? So this V, what we can do is like V can be calculated as hc upon q lambda, right? So now as you know, like if I take hc, this quantity in electron volts, then I can discard this q, right? So and as you know the value of the hc in electron volts is how much? 1.24 electron volts, right? And when I take this value in electron volts, then basically what is the lambda? Lambda you have to take in micrometers, right? When you put hc in ev, you have to take the lambda in micrometers. So 1 angstrom, as you know, 1 angstrom is how much? 10 to the power minus 10 meters, right? So 1 angstrom, I can write it as 10 to the power minus 6 into 10 to the power minus 4 meters. So 1 angstrom becomes 10 to the power minus 4 micrometers, correct? Now I will put this value of 10 to the power minus 4 over here, and so your potential difference will become equal to 12.4 kilovolts. So this much high potential you have to apply if you want to get a wavelength of 1 angstrom, basically that is the wavelength of the X-ray radiation. So we have solved the first problem, right? Now coming to the second problem, it has been asked what is the de Broglie wavelength of the electron in part A just before it hits the target, right? So now as you know, the de Broglie wavelength is given by h upon p, right? But do I know the p? No. But do I know the energy of the electron? Yes, I know the energy of the electron. How I know the energy of the electron? Using this qv, right? And v I have just calculated over here, right? So if I write p in terms of energy, then my problem is solved, right? So this will become equal to h upon p will be nothing but, you know, the energy is nothing but p square by 2m for free electron. So basically what you can say, p is nothing but under root of 2me, correct? So now if you put the value 6.6 into 10 to the power minus 34, then again root of what, 2 into 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31, and energy as you already know, so it is nothing but q into v. So just a minute, yeah, so it will be nothing but q 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, and the v basically the 12.4 kilovolts basically, right? So 12.4 into 10 to the power 3, correct? So when you solve this value, basically you will get lambda as close to 0.109 Armstrong basically, okay? So yeah, so you can go ahead with this, and yeah, so it was a good question, and I hope you are able to get what I have done over here. If you have any doubts, then please feel free to interrupt, okay? Yeah, so now coming to this question basically, just a minute. Yeah, so now it has been given like in a 1D potential well, you have a particle with mass m with a zero energy, and has a time independent wave function that is
A
given by.
small interruption, please.
Yeah, sure.
Just requested that this could be little bit zoomed because the font is too small to
Oh,
get it
okay,
clearly
okay,
seen.
just a minute,
Yeah.
just a minute. For previous questions, it was okay, or it was still a problem?
Okay, sir.
Okay, okay, just a minute. Can you tell me now whether you are able to read the question?
Yeah, now okay.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically, this is a question in a 1D potential well. A particle with mass m with zero energy has a time independent wave function that is given by ax e to the power minus x square by l square. So determine the potential v's of 0 at x equal to 0, and it has been told we have to use the Schrodinger's equation, right? So now just a minute. Yeah, so now what is the Schrodinger's equation? I'm just writing the Schrodinger equation, nothing else, okay? Minus h square by 2m dou square psi by dou x square plus v of x psi of x is equal to e into psi of x. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, e into psi of x, right? But just look in the question, it has been given zero energy, right? So this is nothing but zero, correct? So now what it remains is like minus h square by 2m dou square psi by dou x square plus v of x psi of x will be equal to 0, correct? So now let's say I note this with the equation number 1. Now what has been given, psi of x is equal to ax e to the power minus x square by l square, right? Now I have to get this dou square psi by dou x square from this psi of x, right? So I have to take the double derivative, right? If I understand until I do that, I can't put this in the equation number 1. So differentiating of on both sides of psi of x with respect to x, you will get basically so how we will be doing this, a into x, then the derivative of this e to the power minus x square by l square, right? So e to the power minus x square by l square, I will write it as it is, and then we have to take the derivative of this minus x square by l square, right? So it will come out to be minus 2x by l square, right? And now we have taken the derivative for this term. Now what we will be doing is like we have to take the derivative of x as well. Basically I am applying a what you can say, a product rule of a into b. Basically you have to take the b as a constant, then derivative of a, and then take the a as a constant and derivative of b basically. So then I will take a e to the power minus x square by l square, and derivative of x is nothing but the 1, right? So I have written it like that. Now I have to again take the derivative of this dou psi of x by dou x, right? So again I am taking it, dou square psi of x by dou x square will be nothing but just before that I will just simplify this equation so that it will become easy for taking the further derivative. So if I take the a into what you can say, e to the power minus x square by l square common, then 1 will come from here, and then minus 2x by l square, not 2x, basically x into x is x square, right? So 2x square by l square, right? So I have to take the derivative of this term now. Okay, so now basically it will come out to be a 1 minus 2x square by l square. Again I have to take the derivative of e to the power minus x square by l square, but we have already done it, right? So the derivative is this thing that you are able to see in the bracket. So it will come out like minus 2x by l square into e to the power minus x square by l square, right? So this we have done, and now the thing that remains is like you have to take a, then you have to take the derivative of this term now, right? So now derivative of basically minus 2x square is minus 4x, right, l square into e to the power minus x square by l square, right? So now now like what has been asked in the question is like you have to determine the potential v of 0 at x of 0. So now let's try to do a very simple thing, whether we are able to get the answer very quickly or not. So now what I will be doing is like just check the value of dou square psi of x by dou x square at x equal to 0. What is coming out to be? So what is going to happen in the first term itself? This minus 2x by l square is the term which is multiplying the whole the first term. So if I put x equal to 0, then this term will become equal to 0, and again the x is multiplied with the entire second term, so again this will become equal to 0. So it is coming out to be 0, right? Now if I put the psi of 0, what is the psi of 0? Just look at this psi of x equation. So again x is out of again x is out in the equation. So when I put x equal to 0, again this is becoming 0, right? So if I put this both the term in the 0 in the equation number 1, then what you are going to get is like this value is 0. So 0 plus v of 0, because I am putting x equal to 0, multiplied with 0 is equal to 0. So now v of 0 is becoming of the form 0 by 0. So we are unlucky because it is becoming of the form 0 by 0. So what is actually happening over here? It is just like the 0 by 0 is the limit, right? And its answer is finite. So if I tell you limit as x tends to 0, x upon x, what it is of the form 0 by 0, right? So you apply L'Hopital rule, then it becomes 1 upon 1, and the answer comes out to be 1, right? So what is actually happening is like if we actually have to write the equations, some equations like some terms of x or x square are going to get cancelled, and only after that we are going to get our answer. So basically so there is one more way instead of substituting the equation, I am going to rewrite this equation that you are seeing over here in some different form. So please note down this equation. I will be doing something with this equation now. So basically I am just rewriting the equation number 2. Okay, so this dou square psi of x by dou x square. So what I am going to do is like if you just what you can say, if you just rewrite this equation a little bit different form, basically by just taking out some terms common or something, you can be able to put this equation in this type of a form: minus 2 by l square into 3 minus 2x square by l square. It's okay if you are not able to get this because of some lack of time I'm not explaining this basic term. So basically you just take this equation number 2 and you just try to take some terms common, like e to the power minus x square a. Then there is also x by l square term that you can take as a common, which I have basically done it over here. And now you must be noticing the fact that the psi of x, which has been given over here, it is ax e to the power minus x square by l square, right? So now ax e to the power minus x square by L square. Again, this is psi of x, right? So now my dou square psi of x by dou x square becomes equal to what you can say, psi of x into, if I just multiply these terms inside the bracket, it will become minus 6 by L square plus 4x square by L to the power 4, right? So now what I'm going to do now is like I'm just going to multiply on both the sides by minus h square by 2m. Basically I will tell you what is my purpose, so just note down this. So basically this is the equation number 3, right? So what I'm trying to do, I'm going to modify the equation number 3 by appropriately multiplying the terms so that it resembles the equation number 1, that is the Schrodinger's equation. Here minus h square by 2m has already been multiplied by dou square psi of x by dou x square, right? So that's why I am multiplying with this term on both the sides. So you will be able to get minus h square by 2m dou square psi of x by dou x square is equal to minus 6 by L square. Okay, I will do one thing. I will just don't write it. I will take minus L to the power 4 add h square by 2m psi of x. So what I have done is like this minus h minus from here, and the minus I have taken from the bracket common, and that's why it is becoming like this. So now I will just basically make this term, I will just shift this equation on the left hand side. So it will become like minus h square by 2m dou square psi of x by dou x square plus minus 6 by L square plus 4x square by L to the power 4, right, into h square by 2m psi of x will be 0. So this is my equation number 4. And what was my equation? If I compare this equation number 4 with equation number 1, this is my equation number 1, right? See, this is my equation number 1, right? So the term with the psi of x, the second term that you are seeing over here, the term which is present with the psi of x is my v of x, right? So that second term, the term which is present with psi of x is my v of x, right? So v of x is nothing but h square by 2m into minus 6 by L square plus 4x square by L to the power 4, right? Now now what has been asked in the question. See, we have been asked v of 0 at x equal to 0, right? So now just put x equal to 0 over there. So now v of 0, this term that you are seeing, it will become 0. So you will be only left with h square by 2m into minus 6 by L square. So what is the answer? Minus 3 h square upon m L square. This is your v of 0, right? So now let's check in the answer whether this option is present or not. Yeah, so you can see the second answer, right? So this option has already been present, and I hope we have got the same answer now. So I hope you are able to get this procedure like what I have done. Basically we just sanity check whether it is whether we are directly getting the answer or not, but unfortunately we got some 0 by 0, right? So now some terms are going to get cancelled. So instead of doing this, what I had done is like the second equation itself, I rewrite it in terms of psi of x, and then this equation I try to resemble it like a Schrodinger's equation, and so that we can compare the equations and we can get v of x basically. And after substituting x equal to 0, we got this answer. I hope this was clear to you. And now coming to the again.
So we will start this
Oh, sorry, can you repeat?
we will start this recording session, sir.
I will have the recording of this session. So what I'm going to do is like after 4-5 minutes, like I will be putting a link to the YouTube channel basically, where I will be uploading all the recordings. You will be able to see the recordings. I will upload it by tonight. Okay.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Yeah. So now basically again I have to zoom the image. Just a minute. Yeah. Yeah. So now if you basically look into this question, the wave function of a particle moving in the free space is given by psi of x is equal to e to the power jkx plus 2 into e to the power minus jkx, right? So what we have to calculate is like we have to calculate the energy of the particle. Now just tell me one thing, the particle, the wave function of the particle moving in free space. Free space, what does this free space mean? The particle is moving in the free space, particle is not bounded by anything. So if the particle is not bounded by anything, then the potential of the system is zero, right? Correct. So this is what we put in the Schrodinger's equation. And now just think like this: the particle is not at all bounded, and we know, like we already know, we have seen the EK diagram of a particle which is moving in the free space. It's nothing but what you can say. So this is the E, this is the E, this is the K. So what is the equation basically? So E is nothing but what? H square k square by 2m, right? So we should get this answer, correct? So the h square k square by 2m that you are able to see, this should be the answer. But let's try to, what you can say, let's try to use the Schrodinger's equation just like what we had done now, and let's try to do it basically. So what will happen is like if you just take the derivative of this psi of x. So basically what is psi of x? E to the power jkx plus 2 e to the power minus jkx, right? So if you take the dou psi of x by dou x, it will come out to be what, jk e to the power jkx minus 2 jk e to the power minus jkx, right? Now if you take the double derivative, right, then what you are going to get is like jk will multiply, it will come out to be minus k square e to the power jkx, again jk will multiply, it will come out to be minus 2k square e to the power minus jkx, right? So now if I take minus k square common, minus k square, then it will turn out like e to the power jkx plus 2 e to the power minus jkx. Now note this term in the bracket is nothing but the psi of x again. So what we got, dou square psi of x by dou x square is equal to minus k square psi of x, right? So now if I compare this equation with our Schrodinger's equation, basically what it is, minus h square by 2m or dou square psi of x by dou x square plus v into psi of x is equal to e psi of x, right? But as I told you, v is 0, right? So dou square psi of x basically if I just multiply, if I just take this term on the right hand side, then this will become like dou square psi by dou x square basically is equal to minus 2me by h square psi of x, right? So now compare the 1 and 2 and you will be able to get 2me by h square is k square, right? So we again got the same result, right? So E is equal to h square k square by 2m. So we solved this by two methods. One is already we know the from the lecture material, and another we actually use the Schrodinger's equation, and both the results are matching. And why is it matching? Like of course, like we know the particle is free, so this is not a discretized, this is a continuous function, right? So we already know, and from here also we got the same answer. So this is the answer for the question. And I had one more question, but it will take some time for me to solve that question, and I have to end the session by 5, or else the Google Meet gives a restriction of 60 minutes, so I don't want to end this meeting abruptly. So this was the question that I wanted to solve basically. But what I will do, I will, since anyhow I am going to give this PPT for your reference, I will solve the question in the PPT. I will mention whatever steps, like I will try to solve it in as simple manner as possible, and you can review the question, and basically you can, if you have any doubt regarding this question, you can bring back this same question in the next session basically. So I hope till now this was clear, and hope it the lecture will help. And I have written some review questions as well. So what these review questions are, so these are the review questions, like after going through all the lectures of the week 1, you should be able to answer the just a minute. Yeah, so after going through the lecture material, you should be able to answer most of these review questions. If you have any doubts in the review questions, then I will strongly suggest to refer the reference books, or search it on the internet and try to brainstorm yourself. Even after brainstorming, if you are still having doubt, if you are not able to get the answers, then come back to me in the next session. I will take some of the questions if you are finding any difficulty in this. And yeah, so basically, and one more slide is like I have put some links over here. So these are the links from the YouTube channel. Like I know the concepts of orbitals, maybe mathematically it's clear, but maybe for visualization and all it's little bit difficult, and similarly for the wave function. So I have put some links for the YouTube channel where you will be easily able to visualize what are the orbitals actually, how they are different from the orbits, why the Bohr's model became what you can say obsolete when we moved when the Schrodinger came, and he basically gave you like yeah the wave functions are there, the electron does not revolve in that kind of motion. There are some points where the probability of finding the electrons is very high, and that has been that are given by using these orbitals basically. So I have put some link to the YouTube channels, and what I will do is like this PPT also, like I will try like I'm going to upload the recording, right? So I will try to upload this PPT in the description section of that YouTube channel itself, so that you will be able to get it easily. So yeah, that's it from my side, guys. If you have any question, then I'm very happy to answer the questions. Guys, any questions?
Yeah, can we get the link for that YouTube channel?
Oh, okay, okay. So just a minute. Yeah, in the chat box, I have inserted the link for the YouTube channel. Okay. Yeah, somebody has asked the question. Could you explain more about DFT and how is it useful for determining properties like bulk Seebeck? Uh, I guess it's a part for the digital circuits. My expertise is not more in the verification and the digital side of it. Maybe you can search it on the internet. There are some very good websites. If you want, maybe I can. Basically, in the next session, I will come up. I will send you some links regarding the DFT. But as far as this course is concerned, it's not. Oh, then okay, wait. I mean density function theory. I don't know whether sir is going to cover it or not. So basically, the density function theory is, see, you have the atoms, you have the lattice, you have the atoms, you have, you know, like that 5 into 10 to the power 22 atoms are there. So from there you try to actually calculate, okay, how many states are there which electrons can fill, and actually how many states are already occupied by the electrons. So basically, using the density function theory, what you get is like you get how many electrons are there basically, and why this is important, because unless and until you know the carrier concentration, the holes, the electrons, you won't be able to calculate the current, right? And the current is very important because, as I told you, we circuit designer use that current expression exclusively, and for calculation of gains and designing the circuits, we need that parameter to calculate the transconductance, to calculate the gain or something like that. So if sir doesn't cover that theory, then I don't have much bandwidth to take many to explain it or to cover more numericals. But if I get some time in the next session, and if I see sir has not covered it, then at least I will try to give you some intuitive understanding of the density function theory. I hope this helps.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, how do we ascertain a mass to an object whose behavior we don't exactly know about? For example, an electron.
Okay, that's a very tricky.
I know there's this oil drop experiment which has been used to determine the mass, but still.
Uh, you're calculating telling about the normal mass or the effective mass?
No, just the mass.
There's some physics experiment, as you said. The only thing I know is like they did some experiments, and from there only they calculated the.
Suppose, as per the quantum mechanical treatment, it actually is a wave, and there will be no mass to a wave. So,
Oh, okay. So that's where the concept of your what you can say the effective mass will come into the picture. It's not actually a mass. It is just some what you can say. It has been taken from the. You will see in the future lectures. We use the EK diagrams to actually calculate the assign some mass. It is actually not a mass, you can say. So if you try to measure it just like the oil, the experiment that you told, right? So if you try to do that kind of thing, then you won't be getting that effective mass. It has just been assigned to it. It is not the actual mass that you will be able to feel. Just like you lift some object, right? So you are able to feel some mass, but the effective mass is not going to be the same thing. It is just a concept that has been there to help basically in going ahead with the equations and going to the current equations or something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, welcome. Guys, any more doubts, any feedback that you want to see? You want me to improvise myself somewhere, or was the session okay? Anyone of you can unmute.
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
There was a point where we had to derive the relation between uncertainties in energy and momentum. How did we arrive at that point? Like the usage of dE, the small variations in them.
Okay, okay. I will just share the screen. Are you talking about this question?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, so see, basically, what they have asked is like just determine the uncertainty in the kinetic energy, right? So now, what we generally do, like you know the relation between energy and the momentum, right? So whatever, so what we want to calculate is like just consider this as like this. So if there is any change in momentum, basically, then by how much, then that change will going to get reflected into the change in the energy, right? So if my momentum changes by a certain amount, then by what amount my energy will be changing. So that this is what the basic definition of your derivative is, right? So basically you calculate this, you calculate the dx by dt. So you calculate, okay, if my if basically at time t my position is x1, and at time t plus delta t my position just changed. So what is the change basically of basically the numerator with respect to the denominator variable? I have just considered over here, like yeah, if you just take the change in the momentum, like then that d of p square, how is it going to get reflected over here? So this is just the normal thing that you will be able to see in many mathematical textbook, and even in case of the physics, like in your plus 2, you must have used this in the maybe units and dimensions chapter was there, right? So you used to definitely do this. Basically you had some complicated equation, basically just a into b square into c to the power 4. Then you used to calculate, okay, if my c changes by this much amount, then what is the total change that is actually going to occur in the final equation. So I have just done this from that units and dimensions that you had studied in 11th or 12th.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, okay, good, good. Yeah, guys, any feedback? Like, do you want me to improvise anywhere, or was the session good? You were able to understand. Just tell me about the starting flow. You were able to get at least something out of that flow, right? Or you still had some doubts over there? I know, like, some of you will be a second year student, so digesting this much things will be difficult. But I just try to give you a broad picture of why this thing is important, and where this thing fits in the overall industry, overall semiconductor industry, basically, which has different domains. So, like, was that part clear, or you had doubts over there? Hello. Hello.
Okay, sir. Very good session, sir.
It was okay. Yeah. Good. Good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Good. So I guess you guys don't have any doubts, I guess, and I hope the lecture was good. If you have any feedback, then just type in the comment section if you have any problem with the audio, or just tell me. Like, just don't shy away, because I'm here for you guys. Like, I want you to understand the things. I'm here to make the things simple for you. So if I'm failing at my job, then it's my responsibility to change the way I'm teaching. So if you have anything, then just unmute yourself. Just tell me, or else we will close this session. Any doubts? I'm seeing there are 9 or 10 people. Guys, any suggestions, any feedback? Thank you, sir, for the session. Session was great. Okay, thank you so much. I felt really good after reading the feedback.
It was well enough, sir.
It was well organized. Good, good. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, I guess I will stop presenting now. Maybe keep yourself logged in on phone. To yeah, that's a good suggestion. By Jehan Nozer. Yeah, yeah, I will definitely do that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure, and yeah, please check the link. I will upload it by tonight around 11 or 12. I will be able to upload the video because this recording is huge, right? It will consume around 2 GB or something, so it will take some time to upload it on the YouTube. I will also upload the PPT on the description. And if you have any doubts, just please go through the review questions because it will help you to check your understanding. And if you have any doubts over there, then that's come in the next section, next session, and just ask me those doubts. Okay. Yeah, so stopping my presentation, and thank you all of you for joining the session. It was great, and this was one of my first teaching experience, and it was a very good session for me. And I like the way you guys are interacting, giving me feedback. So just keep these sessions active because unless until I get some feedback from you, then I won't be feeling the things are good. So yeah, thank you all of you, and we will leave the
When is
session.
the next session?
When
When
the
will
next
be the
session
next
will be on
session?
the same time, Sunday 4 p.m.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.